Hello, everybody, and welcome to Good Tech, an ongoing discussion around ethics and technology. I'm Elizabeth Perry. As a reminder, this show is recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel on ubngo/goodtech, ubngo.com/goodtech, that is, and any podcast channel you choose. If you're tuning in live today and have any questions or comments, you can dial the number on your screen and we'll do our best to get you in on the conversation. Those of you who like to message, I'm also getting those on Skype and on the YouTube channel. Today, we're going to talk about crisis and how can we maintain strength in such uncertain times. First and foremost, I hope you're staying safe and healthy wherever you are in the world. If you're a health professional or someone still out there working, we want to thank you for all you do. This is a trying time, both personally and professionally. Wherever you are, you're affected by a sort of global lockdown in the face of COVID-19. Both in our personal lives and in our professional ones, we may feel isolated, out of touch, disconnected, anxious, and uncertain about our future. But what can we do to stay strong? How can we bolster ourselves and our companies during this time? And what can we do to help others? Today, we're joined by someone who has helped people and companies work through times of crisis. She has worked with the likes of Apple, Microsoft, Cisco, Symantec, FC Barcelona, the Red Sox, Amnesty International, and the list goes on. Here to talk about managing crisis and to help us all cope with what's happening in the world, please welcome writer, speaker, crisis communication specialist, and founder of Incendio International, Jane Gideon. Hey, Jane. Jane, thanks so much for coming on the show today. I trust you're well over there in your private lockdown. How are things in San Francisco, and what's the overall mood over there?
You know, we're technically on lockdown. I would say the streets are still kind of moving, just people aren't at work. And we're all kind of probably like you in Spain, locked down in our houses and trying to just weather the storm.
Yeah, it's something. I think, I just want to tell people that we might be having a little technical, interesting things going on during the show. Hopefully you can hear us okay. But that's normal because everybody's on these tools, Zoom and Whereby and Idka and, all this stuff. So I think people are having some issues. But so Jane, you've dealt with crisis over the years. And have you ever experienced anything quite like this? I mean, this is different. How?
Yeah, this is very different than anything I've ever experienced with crisis. Now, crisis is always unique. It's one of the things I love about crisis, despite that sounds sadistic and terrible, but I like crisis because it requires you to think, because every crisis is different. You can't just do a cookie cutter playbook on crisis. You really have to approach it from what's happening right now. But this is unprecedented because I've kind of had to throw out the crisis communications playbook in many ways and try to just go with daily, hourly information on how to communicate with customers, employees, consumers. It's shifting all the time.
And how is it, how are people dealing with this? What does a crisis mean for individuals and businesses around the world? I mean, how are people managing this? And you mentioned offline that we're talking about a different kind of communication that's going on. And it's not just how, we're being communicated to by the leaders. It's also how companies are managing it, how people are talking with each other. How is this different with things like social media, for example?
Yeah, crisis is by definition sort of a disruption in the normal way of doing things. So crisis always is a matter of anger, fear, or disruption that is changing your normal cycle of doing things. And so it generally falls around, people are afraid when changes are happening and they feel out of control. Sorry, dogs will now bark. Sorry. This is the fun of working from home as well.
I've got my own dog. I've got the door bolstered shut. So
yeah, sorry. I have treats at the ready to kind of distract them when these things happen. So I apologize.
Talk about, so we're in your own little crisis over there with the dogs. How many dogs do you have over there?
Adopted 2 rescue dogs recently, 2 senior dogs, and so they're getting used to the place as well. So anyway, managing their barking is things. She just don't know the place yet. So,
anyway, so there's my own personal
crisis. We'll see how we do it. That's one way to do it, is just
like with humor. However, in a crisis
like this, where it's a public health crisis, humor
doesn't really work.
Because people's lives are at stake. So dogs barking in the background can be in the background.
But when people's lives and health are at stake, that's not something to feed with humor. And that's one of the things that I've noticed on this crisis situation is people have tried to do that, lead with humor, on cheeky little comments like, it's a viral time. Let's see if you can go viral. This is not the time to be joking about viruses and viral, or joking about anything. So, anyway, sorry, let me just get my dog and we'll see if we can get him to calm down and we'll meet him.
No, that's okay. If you need to take time to get these things under control, there's a little bit of the vidcast is offline. No? Oh, goodness. What a cute dog.
Yes, we just have to bring him into the picture so he'll calm down. I think.
Hi, pretty puppy. So I'll try to keep going, but this is an interesting point. What you're saying is that people, and this was another question that I had, is that, how are people dealing with this? And we're getting inundated with a barrage of messages telling, from companies saying, we're doing this, or, we're all in this together, and it's getting old. It's getting too much, and humor is not the way to go. So what is the way to go?
Well, I think the first is, the whole thing with we're all in this together is about leading with, trying to lead with compassion, to understand that people are scared and they're suffering and they're worried, and we want to lead with helping them cope with that by saying we're all in this together and we understand. So that's really where that came from. So I think that's a good place to start. But like you said, you can't just keep repeating the same thing. I think there's a lot to be communicating about right now, because it's, as I said, this is a changing day by day situation, hour by hour sometimes. So one of the things that I've recommended to clients is to stop bots and automatic ad posting and automatic responses, because those bots, this is where bots and algorithms really fail. They don't understand the human element of what's happening. So stop responding with automatic email distributions. I'm getting a lot of, and even with those, they're so off center. I got one the other day that said, it was a fashion organization that said, what's your work from home wardrobe? And I'm like, I'm not worried about my work from home wardrobe right now. I'm worried about, is business going to fall apart? Am I going to be able to pay my bills? Is my business going to collapse? These are things everyday people are worried about. Food on the table. They're not worried about their work from home wardrobe. So it's really got to be tuned in the core of the crisis.
Yeah, I think, if I'm understanding what you're saying, it's kind of like stay relevant. And that means you have to do more work, because you can't automate your social media posts, and you can't, use those tools to just throw things out there like, hey, you want to throw a party? That's not going to work, right?
Yeah, so. That's right. Your social media posts need to be well thought out. They need to be crafted. They need to be in the moment. I wouldn't automate anything right now, nothing. I would make sure you have a human touch to every single communication that you do. Unless it's a mass communication, like, you have to announce to your customers that your store is shutting down because of shelter in place. Now, that's something you have to issue a mass distribution, but you don't automate that. You've got to put human beings behind it and thought behind it.
Right. And is that going to be costly for companies? I mean, so that gives us into like, what is the impact? What are we seeing, both short-term and long-term, the consequences of this crisis?
Well, I think like any crisis, the long-term impact depends on how you manage your credibility during this time. So with any crisis, generally the rule is A, be honest, be consistent, and communicate all the time, even when you don't have something to say. Like one of my clients, we have a weekly communication that's going out, even if we don't have any updated news, which we always do, because, in this crisis, everything changes day to day. So we feel like we should be doing more often. But weekly, no matter, even if you don't have anything to say, come out and talk or communicate, because in the absence of information, people make up their own scenarios. It's human nature that we want to fill in the blanks. We want to color the white space. And we will generally do that in the opposition. If the space is white, we'll paint it black. We'll come up with the darkest scenario that we can to explain that absence of information. So the best thing you can do is communicate often, be as consistent and honest as you can. And when information changes, say, now we have new information, so here's what we're going to do now. And when you don't get it right, explain why you didn't get it right, and just keep moving with honesty and transparency. What I tell clients is, in the absence of information, especially in a pandemic like this, where we really don't know what's going to happen, you really have to lead with your values. What does your company and your brand value? And at the end of this, back to your question of what the outcome should be. If you do it right, there should be a better loyalty to your brand and a better understanding of what you stand for. So I was looking at some of the things that do right and do wrong. I talked about people making jokes in a wrong time. I did see a small bank in Edmond, Oklahoma, proactively a couple of weeks ago sent out a message that said they were halting all loan fees, collection, everything for 120 days. Now, that's a small bank. Now, that's not Citibank or Chase. That's a small bank who's going to take that hit pretty well. But man, if that were my bank, I'd be shouting them from the rooftops. I'd be telling everybody how awesome my bank was. I would be loyal to them forever, because they put themselves and their own fees and aside to understand their customer needs at that time. And that is how you inspire loyalty in a crisis.
Wow. And what about what about the leaders in this? So we have it's threefold, right? The people that are supposed to be communicating correctly. And you also mentioned data, that we're missing data, that we're not sure of what's going on. So what should our leaders be doing? What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong?
Well, gosh, so the business leaders in a crisis like this situation take their cues from government leaders. And, I'd like to compare and contrast. I worked on the SARS epidemic back in 2003, and it is so different from what's happening today. I think it's worth comparing and contrasting. The SARS epidemic, the outbreak started in China in same timing, around November, December of 2002. And by March, the World Health Organization had declared it an epidemic or a pandemic. They didn't declare it a pandemic, a public health emergency is what they declared it. So in that, when they did that, they issued they did the genome sequencing of the SARS virus. They issued tests, and governments tested consistently by the directions of the WHO. So and the protocol of what to do if you tested was consistent as well. If you tested positive, then you went into quarantine, and everyone you came in contact with went into quarantine. And everyone was really clear on what the procedure was, and everyone followed it. And governments cooperated. They shared information. They shared their testing information. And the result is, by pretty much end of May of 2003, it was contained. So that was a pretty fast turnaround on a pretty deadly disease. And the fallout was minimized because of the global cooperation and the facts and the data that were coming out. We had testing, we could track the spread. And therefore, as businesses, we knew exactly what to do. The WHO had given us guidelines. We knew how to communicate with our employees and our customers and what to say. Mm-hmm. Now let's fast forward to this pandemic. Global leaders aren't being consistent. They're not following the guidelines of the WHO. The WHO had tests ready pretty much immediately by January. This outbreak happens December 1st. By January, we have a test developed by the WHO that went out to most countries. So we started widespread testing in China, in South Korea, in Europe, but the US refused that test and wanted to make their own test. So that delays data coming in from the US. We don't have the same consistent data like we did in SARS, because we want to do our own path, our own method. Whether that's right or wrong, what it does is delay the data. So we're not able to track the outbreak. That creates confusion. Leaders aren't sure what to say. They say the tests are coming, but then the tests aren't there. They say it's a hoax, and then they say, okay, it's not a hoax, everybody shelter in place, and now we may be reversing again. So leaders are sending mixed messages. And what that does is cause business leaders to send mixed messages, and their customers and their employees to react in mixed ways. So some employees and customers go along with the shelter in place, but some are adamant that it's a hoax
because that's what they've heard, and they get angry that they're being asked to shelter in place, and you have a mixed reaction from your employees, so it's a lot less controllable, and therefore it's hard to
contain everything, not just the virus itself, but everyone's emotions in reaction to it. So this is why I say lead with your values. You just have to go with what your company values. If your company values making money at all costs, maybe you are going to ask people to stay and work. If your company really values health and safety of employees and customers, you're going to lead with, we're doing this shutdown because on the air of caution. And I've seen various approaches to that. But the biggest difference is 2003 SARS was very orchestrated and controlled, and this one is very chaotic and uncontrolled. Yeah. And the thing that I think is contributing to that is social media. In 2003, we didn't have social media and disinformation being spread. In 2020, it is everywhere, and that is hard to control. So we had one set of data, truth, facts, and science back in the SARS epidemic. And this time we don't. We have disinformation, and we also have news organizations that are not delivering facts and news, but are delivering pundit commentary that are meant to rile up and create an emotional reaction from their viewers. So finding truth in this scenario is really hard. And we've broken down trust in organizations like media and government. So it's really hard to find a piece of truth in all of this and know what to do. And that's really concerning for anybody who's running a business.
I think that's an excellent message, and such an important message. And you know, for companies and people out there using social media to get their messages out, is there something that they can do to curb this like emotional response trigger click thing?
Yeah. As a company, we with my clients, when disinformation gets out there, the first thing, the most important thing you need to do is counter it, is say that's not true, and here are the facts and data that we have to counter that that misinformation, and why we're not taking action on that direction, because the facts and the data lead us to this conclusion. There's a time in crisis communications to not feed a monster, to let it die on its own and to kind of stay in the background. A pandemic is not that scenario. A pandemic, you want to cut off bad information, misinformation as quickly as possible. Now, we can't control what governments are doing because they are not cutting off misinformation, and social media is not cutting off misinformation, but you can control your own company's information on how you're responding, why you're responding, what sources you're relying on, what government laws you're trying to adhere to, and just be real crystal clear with those communications. And going back to my first tip was why you don't want to automate anything. This is exactly why you don't want to automate social media, because it can get out of control really fast. And you want to have human beings posting and moderating and shutting down disinformation as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's excellent advice, and I think as hard as it is, it's like it's better to send one message out than 30 that are just like irrelevant. You know, so again, you know, you're telling us to stay relevant. What are some of the examples, other examples of? I know we're skipping around a little bit on this. Sorry about that, but on what are some examples or some stories of people that have done it right and people that have done it wrong?
Yeah. So I don't like to call out specific companies, but especially on the who's done it wrong kind of thing, though I've seen of that. I would say on the who's done it right, I did mention the bank. I was in the small town in Oklahoma. I'm so impressed with them. That was a really good move. Another good example is, I'm so sorry. I had them calm. Another good example is, sorry.
It's okay.
If I can come back over here.
Life is what happens when you're doing other things, I guess.
Exactly. Another good example is a coffee shop here in San Francisco, a small coffee shop. I've probably seen the best reactions from small businesses, honestly. There's a coffee shop here in San Francisco who I just happen to know one of their employees. So I didn't work on this, so I can't take credit for it, but they communicated early on the outbreak of the coronavirus, or early because they're in food service. So their employees, their customers were equally at risk of being exposed. So they started early with just simple things like, we're aware of this virus. We know it's happening right now. There doesn't seem to be a threat to our community. So we're going to keep business as usual, but we'll keep you posted. And as things escalated, they did keep them posted. And eventually had to, because of the shelter in place order in San Francisco, put everyone, make everybody, they couldn't even work from home because it's food and service, it's a coffee shop. So they sent them home and said, we'll keep you posted, but we're going to pay your salaries through April 7th, which was the first shutdown deadline.
Right.
Now, all their employees are gone and not coming into the office. So they have these Zoom conference calls where they keep everybody updated and they do check-ins. How are you feeling? I think one day they had send us a meme that expresses your mood right now, which sounds lighthearted, but it was really to check in on their employees and see how they're doing. And one of the other things that they did was really help the community when they had to shut down their stores. They couldn't donate their food to the shelters because of the virus. So they gave that food to their employees, and the employees then kind of did a mission to take that extra food to the elderly in their neighborhoods, and did this of their own fruition delivery of their leftover food to people who needed it. And I thought that was a really nice example of how this little coffee shop inspired caring for others, because they cared for their employees, and they took care of their employees, and their employees went and reciprocated and took care of their communities. That is an example of doing it right.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's just so simple.
Yeah, it really is simple. It's like, be compassionate, be kind,
Yeah.
help each other.
And stay engaged,
Yeah.
and stay active. And what are some, I mean, I don't know if you had another story for me, so I won't go on, and I didn't want to
No, that's
interrupt you.
okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, but I was just thinking of other ways in which, people can stay engaged and stay relevant. Um, because like, for example, if you're IKEA
Uh-huh.
or your office furniture supply store, you're
Yeah.
obviously not going to get much business right now. But if you
Yeah.
can repurpose what you have and
Yeah.
start saying, do you need equipment at home to work from home or something like that?
Yeah,
I
I've
mean,
seen a lot of that with businesses. I mean, I think the biggest need, at least here in the U.S., where we don't have a lot of supplies. I think that's true elsewhere, but we are especially low on stock of basic materials for hospitals. So, we see people in San Francisco. There's a community organization next door sent out a thing about, can you sew masks? We'll send you the pattern. So Nextdoor has been really helpful in getting small communities, neighborhoods together to help out, but contributing to a big cause. So you get a pattern, you can sew masks for your local hospital. You feel like you're contributing. But back to businesses that can contribute. I saw a mattress company here that offered to do free delivery if you're home and you're homebound and you need an extra bed or something goes wrong. Free delivery, they'll come help you. Um, I saw lots of people offering, especially healthcare workers, anything that they could, and hospitals, anything that they could. One of the really interesting things is a neighborhood mom and pop shop here sent out a message to their customers on both email and Nextdoor and social media. So all three areas, saying, what hours would you like us to keep? What is the best hours that would work for you in your new schedules of working from home and also isolating? And we're going to corner off these hours for elderly and disabled or people who have vulnerable conditions. And then what hours work for the rest of you? And really got community input on how they could serve the community. And I thought that was really smart.
Yeah, that is smart. And what are some of the things you can do that aren't so smart?
Oh, I saw a VC firm send out a message to all their entrepreneurs who are clearly worried about going out of business right now and not being able to weather this storm. That was like a bad parent slapping them, going, you better get to your returns. You better produce during this
And they
time.
actually put that out as
it was like an email, no excuses. If now's the time to figure out how to capitalize and how to work through this. It was a really, really bad message. And anybody who knows anything about entrepreneurs, especially Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, I mean, they have a very high suicide and depression rate compared to other entrepreneurs. So it was a really insensitive email to say, you can't fail right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, we're talking about protection. Is there any, I mean, I know it's sort of chaotic and there's just so much going on. We don't know what the future holds or where we're going to be in 60 days. But do you have any words of advice on how companies can stay productive, even if, they can't be really particularly relevant? How can they stay productive?
Well, I think it depends on the business, but I think flexibility in your business model really helps. I'm working with a ride sharing company that has, some ride sharing is down in many because people aren't going to work and because people are afraid of getting sick and commuting with drivers. So ride sharing is down, but deliveries are up. So if you can move your model from one need that's down to another need that's up, that can be a good way to survive and stay positive and do some good too. Some of those drivers are helping with healthcare workers. And I love this story. I saw a driver who'd put up a sheet of plastic between the front seat and the passenger seat, and you could see through it and everything, but it was clearly about making passengers feel safe, that they can be in the car and not be contaminated. And we put a little sign up on the plastic that said, "Love can penetrate plastic." So it was so lovely. I mean,
that's great. And I think lovely is the answer.
Yeah.
You got to just be, and I think that's sort of the theme of today's. Go ahead.
The more that we can do to be positive and help, I mean, people will feel better about supporting your business.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a smile, it's contagious. If you're putting out good stuff during this awful time, and staying positive.
Follow the people who are helping. What is that saying? Yeah. I think more than ever, this is the time to focus on who's helping. And are you part of the help, or are you part of the problem? Are you
right? And it's sort of like
chaos, or are you causing people to smile? And
right. And
there's love through the plastic and through the social distancing. I think that's
right. And panic never works. Worry never works. You have to stay positive, focused, productive, resilient, whatever, do the right thing, stay at home, whatever they're telling you. So what do you see for the future for companies? Are we going to be able to survive this? I mean,
we'll always survive. I mean, business and human beings in general are so resilient. We will survive and evolve. I think we'll see changes in how people work, for sure. With everybody working from home, I think we'll see more flexibility in the workforce, and people being able to stay home when they need to stay home. Now that everybody's had to stay home and have people in their house, I think there'll be more compassion for caregivers who have to take care of children or elderly parents at home, and giving them the flexibility to do that. I hope we'll see things like that. I think the biggest change that is up for grabs is conferences. Those of us who have, and myself included, who have relied on business through conferences, this may be a whole new world. And those people who are running conferences may really need to rethink how we gather people. I think the long-term hesitance to gather in the thousands is going to linger at least through this year. Probably.
I mean, we've seen it. Yeah. Mobile World Congress. No desire to go to a huge, massive conference with people coming in from all over the world. What about travel? How do you see that? Is that going to change?
Well, it's interesting. I wonder how people will react as we see, like I saw the numbers in San Francisco that pollution is down 36% in just, a week and a half of shutdown. That's a huge change in our environment, just by shutting everything down for a week. Everybody has to travel. So I see travel will go up, but you look at like Venice and the waters are clear and fish are coming in and the ecology of things are changing. And I heard some of the tourism managers in Venice saying that they want tourists to come back. That's a huge part of their economy, but maybe not in the same numbers that they were coming in. So this might be a chance to put in some restrictions or some filtering in how people travel and when is it necessary. And even in tourism, what kind of numbers are you going to let in that would destroy the progress that has been made in restoring some of the ecological environment that we have across the world. I would like
Yeah.
to, maybe I'm optimistic. I don't know. Maybe tourism's just going to go, nah, just give us the money. Everybody come back in. If people get used to green waters in Venice, it will be hard to watch it go away.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't it fake news about dolphins coming in? I mean, really?
Yeah,
But
probably.
that's another social
But
media
there are
thing.
fish that you can see, and part of it is just the sludge of the mud is not being moved by the boats, so it's calm, settled, so you can see the fish. I'm sure there were fish that were there. I don't know what kind of fish. I haven't looked into that, but it has been interesting to see Venice talk about that. So
now, so getting off track a teeny bit here. I know that you're a privacy advocate.
Yeah.
And you mentioned to me before today's chat that you were saying privacy is very important to us right now. How is that true?
Well, I think, it's always a conundrum in a situation like a pandemic. You need the data to make good decisions, to understand the spread, how it's spread, where the spread is most concentrated. You need data, and that data needs to be testing. Now, how we test and what we do with that data is what's at risk. So, for example, speaking of fake news, Trump had announced in a conference a press conference, that Google was setting up a website to where you could go in and give your symptoms and your information, and they would determine whether you needed to be tested or not, and tell you where to go to a testing site. So the first minute I heard that, before I knew it wasn't even true, was that, am I going to have to hand over all this data to Google, that they are not under HIPAA compliance rules their business model is to sell that data. So do I feel comfortable giving my health information to a company like Google? Well, it turns out they didn't have the site up, and it wasn't ready, and it was their sister company Verily that was doing it. And the first day they tried to launch it, it crashed. So it's not really working. But that's a privacy concern. Being able to monitor through anonymous tests where the spread is and getting that data is important, but having to hand over personal information is not okay, and that's a scarier proposition. And if you look at in the United States, there's a regulation that's trying to go through right now, actually, which is to require science to publicize all the backing data for a new regulation. So if the CDC wants to propose a new regulation, or the public health authorities want to propose a new regulation, they have to publish all the data and science behind it, every bit of it. So the idea is transparency, but what it does is you have to the idea is that your personal data could then be published on what your healthcare. If you were tested for that virus, then that could go into one of those CDC reports with your name to justify that the test was actually done. Now, that's a very scary proposition. So it's hard. You need the data, but you don't need personalized data.
Yeah, that's something that people are talking about, and in politics, we're talking about during a crisis, we give certain data, we lose some of our rights to privacy. Yeah. Is that effective? Is it dangerous, setting a precedent for something else?
Well, it definitely sets a precedent. I mean, if we look at what happened in 9/11, that we gave up a lot of privacy and surveillance rights, and we've never gotten them back. It was supposed to be a crisis temporary situation, but we've never gotten them back. They've only gotten worse. And that really opens the door to more privacy erosion of privacy rights. And I'm afraid that a pandemic like this will erode privacy access even more, or rights even more. Where did this news article come? But I read that because we're not complying, because going back to mixed messages, that people some people believe they should comply with shelter in place. Some people don't thinks it's a hoax, so they don't want to comply with shelter in place. So you have shelter in place governments who have issued shelters in place, and people are still moving. So there was this threat and enforcement to use location tracking data in your cell phone to see who's moving and where, so they can then enforce it. Okay, that's a double-edged sword. We need to enforce it. We need to stop the spread of the disease. But are we going to give up our right to privacy in process? You know?
It's a tough one. But I think, I think we need to have some sort of regulation or something in place so that we don't lose privacy, but we keep people safe. And I think, there's a balance, but there's a difference between privacy and and breaking the law or.
Yeah, and I think it can be done. Part of it goes back to what I said originally with the SARS epidemic. It was leadership. It was everybody was consistent. These are the rules. If you violate them, there are fines. And if you are sick and you go out and you expose other people, then that's a crime. And that was in Asian countries where they have more leeway to do things like that. But it did shut it down fast. But they didn't have to violate privacy and expose who you were to everybody in the process. If you were caught out, there was testing in like airports and schools and public transportation. If you tested for a fever and you were told to quarantine and then you violated that quarantine order, then that's where you got into trouble. If you violated a quarantine order after you've tested positive. So you don't have to publish anybody's data or track them to manage that situation.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. We're down to our last few minutes, but I wanted to, give you a chance to kind of, leave something with the audience. What would you like to leave people with today? What's your message?
My message is, don't underestimate the value of communication. Your customers want to hear from you. Your employees especially want to hear from you. The market wants to hear from you as a leader on how you're leading in this crisis. The more leaders that emerge, the better off you are. And leading with compassion. So communicate often, lead with compassion, but lead. Don't just sit in the background, lead, do something as a business leader, as a business owner, step up, lead, communicate, give the comfort and information that your constituencies, your audiences are looking for.
Great. Yeah. Thanks so much. No, I think it's a simple message. And I think, what we're saying at Idka, and this is not, is you got to simplify, you've got to use tools that can simplify the way that you communicate, stay transparent, stay honest. Don't try to, get all, weird about your messaging and do funny things. It's not a funny time, right? So anyway, but if anybody out there has any questions for Jane or myself, please connect with us on Idka. It's www.idka.com. Sign up for a free account. We're actually giving away free corporate accounts until things are under control. So contact us at idka.com/contact if you want to get in touch. Jane, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for bringing some light to us all today. Yes. And we'll stay in touch and talk again soon.
Yes, you stay safe in Spain.
Yeah, well, Spain is one of those places where we're seeing the spread fast, so we're locked down. We're not going anywhere. Thank God for technology and the fact that I can see you now.
Yes, and I look forward to the day where I can visit Spain again.
Yay! All right, well, thanks for bringing some light to us again, Jane. And to our listeners and viewers out there, please share the love and don't forget to subscribe to Idka's YouTube channel or follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram for updates. Thanks so much to all for joining us. Be well, be safe. Stay positive wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you again on the next Good Tech.